Balochistan has been the center of conflict and violence since decades. It is home to not only a very proud people, but also it is home to the largest amount of natural resources that Pakistan has. Historically, Balochistan was an independent state for a few months before it was annexed by Pakistan in 1948. And the people of Balochistan took it to heart and felt very betrayed because they had expected Pakistan's support in their existence as a people that is very distinct from the population that they consider distinct from the population of Pakistan. Since then, the region has experienced multiple insurgencies which have been met by military force. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province by land area, but it is a place where its own people have felt the most suppressed over the decades because their richness their richness in terms of land, in terms of culture, in terms of resources, has faced systemic oppression by the Pakistani state. There have been many protests as well as insurgencies that have sought to re-establish the Balochistan as an independent entity. Minerals, coal, natural gas, Balochistan has it all. It has very vast resources of these naturally occurring resources and supplies 45% of Pakistan's natural gas requirements. Despite its wealth, this is only translated to further oppression. Does this remind you a little bit of how Africa is oppressed by so many European nations and has been since decades, centuries really? That their wealth, their naturally occurring resources have not really counted for much in the development of their people. It has instead caused them to be more oppressed by nations that have more resources to oppress them and instead exploit these resources and don't allow them to reach the people of Balochistan. Now, we are talking about Balochistan today because the latest train hijacking has gotten renewed interest and the internet is relatively freer than mainstream media. As we all know, the Yazidis were not covered when they were undergoing systematic ethnic cleansing before, but for once, the Baloch people are being given attention. So it should make one think about how media is responsible in so many ways, and it should take its responsibility seriously that ignoring such an area of conflict is probably not in the best interest of its people. But then, of course, the media does not really function for the interest of people. It functions for very different monetary reasons. And so, if you value content like this on independent channels like mine, please consider subscribing and sharing this with your friends and family. Back to the video. So, one of the instances that I remember very clearly was reading about Karima Baloch. Now, because I'm Indian, we're always aware of things, sometimes aware of things that are ongoing in our neighborhood. And knowing that Karima Baloch was a very prominent activist who escaped to Canada to avoid being hunted down by the Pakistani military, to avoid her family having to face the consequences of her protests and activism. And there, it was in Canada that her body was found. Someone leaked her. It was murder, so it wasn't of natural causes. It was a suspicious death, and I don't think that most of us are naive enough to believe that it was natural causes. So her death depended on someone actually leaking information about her in Canada. So, and the Canadian government has not really found any suspects. So, we know that Canada has become a hub of a lot of mishaps and a lot of drug and gang related violence. It's also an international center for a lot of crime. So, it's just something that happened, and she became one more statistic, and all of the people that the Pakistani army has disappeared, who have been outspoken about their affiliation with Balochistan and its independent identity. And this is mainly due to the oppression that they have faced. It is not as much an ethno-nationalistic pride that is only speaking up. Now, imagine this is the region from which Pakistan is supplied with its natural gas, right? It has so many natural resources to offer, all the rare earth, minerals. And all of this has not helped them. Instead, to avoid them being benefited at all and other majorities getting the value of their resources, they have been oppressed, and so they needed to protest. And Karima Baloch was one of the more prominent ones. Another lady, Shari Baloch, and I'm so flabbergasted that I do not see too many articles about her, but I remember when it happened, it was pretty big news. So Shari Baloch was one of the, she's considered a martyr by her community, but she was actually someone who blew up people. So that is terrorism, but it's something that the BLA, the Balochistan Liberation Army, has not shied away from, right? As we can see in the case of the recent hijacking. Now, what the BLA says is that it is targeting only military personnel. It is letting the women and the children go. It is only attacking men. Now, it has been confirmed by some of the eyewitnesses, some of the former hostages as well, but really it's not officially confirmed, so I can't really confirm this. It's an allegation. So Shari Baloch was someone who was very well educated. She was a mother of two, and she blew herself up. She went in as a suicide bomber, and she attacked a sort of CPEC establishment, or she blew up basically Chinese workers who were working on the CPEC project. And a lot of it is based in Balochistan, by the way. Now, we are talking about Balochistan today because of the train hijacking. So let's get to it. The Baloch Liberation Army hijacked a train, and it took hundreds of hostages. I think the initial count was about 400. It was not an isolated event. It has happened before. They have actually tried to hijack trains, and the last one was in 2017. So essentially, that's what I'm saying, that the importance of media in such situations. Everyone's suddenly talking about Balochistan. It's garnering international attention, but it did not do so in 2017. It speaks to the freedom of the internet at that time and the freedom of media as well. So, that's something that we need to be cognizant of at all times, that it's not new. Everyone's getting free internet right now, and I think accessibility to information is much more freer. But we should be very grateful for all of this, because otherwise we would be fed exactly what a very small population of elites would determine that we were going to be fed. So in 2017 as well, there was an attempt to hijack a train, but in 2025, the Pakistan military alleges that it has control of the situation. However, many people have been killed. The BLA accuses the people on the train, the military personnel on the train, of being genociders and participants in ethnic cleansing. And one can't really deny it, considering all of the human rights violations that Karima Baloch also spoke of and people like her spoke of before. It affects not only Pakistan, it affects Afghanistan, China, Iran, India, all of the neighbors that it has. We are affected by goings on in the region. So, Chinese interest is something that I mentioned earlier. Shari Baloch attacked a Chinese facility. She ended up killing people. Now, why? Because CPEC is seen as further exploitation of Balochistan, right? I forgot to elaborate on CPEC. It's the Chinese Pakistan Economic Corridor, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, I think. And essentially, they are creating a lot of infrastructure. China is really good at this, by the way. This is how they fortify their own borders. This is how they encroach on other people's lands, by building roads and ports and bridges and things like dams. So they're doing this in Pakistan as well. Pakistan is a very willing participant in CPEC, which is now seen as a major failure because it's taken a lot of money, not given the results, um, and not giving results in uncertain political. Uh, Politically unstable conditions is something that I think is a topic for another video that I can discuss. So if that's something that you're interested in, do drop me a comment below. Now, China is developing Gwadar port. Gwadar port is, something that has a lot of potential. India is developing the Chabahar port in Iran. So, and by the way, Balochistan is actually, the Baloch people are split across Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. It's not just relegated to Pakistan. As I said before, they were an independent people, and they did not expect Pakistan to attack and absorb the region. So, ports, pipelines, natural resources. It's a combination ripe for conflict, right? In these days and times, actually, in all days and times, but especially because weapons have gotten so much bigger and worse. I know that's not a word, but anyway, it's a war on resources, war for resources, and control and regional control. So because we know what China does to the countries and the regions that it comes into. It's a revanchist power. And you should check, if you've checked the meaning of revanchist, then drop me a comment below, because you should. So now, Iran has interests because, look, everything in today's era can be understood as a bit of a proxy war. Sometimes, if it doesn't mean that there are no real organic reasons for these things happening. There are, but these are often exploited by external resources, making a little bit of proxy war a reality in most conflicts today across the world. So, with regards to Iran, now Iran is interested so the Baloch people are sort of a threat to the Iranian regime as well. But in Pakistan, they wouldn't mind as much because they have interests. And in 2024, I think early 2024, Iran actually bombed Pakistan and Pakistan retaliated. And then it was just sort of seen as a scuffle between friends and brushed under the carpet. This is bombing two different nations. So they Iran blames Pakistan for sheltering militants and terrorists, and so it is it has its own reasons for interest in Balochistan. Afghanistan, the Taliban is happy to keep Pakistan on the boil. India, same. Does it help the US? Yes. This affects Chinese interests, and the US has also quietly funded development through other channels to try and counter the Chinese influence. I wouldn't say that they are too good at it, just because if you remember, the US actually funded the creation of Taliban as an oversight. It didn't mean to. The CIA funneled money to Pakistan to cull the terrorism, to quell it. But Pakistan, being Pakistan, actually grew it into the Taliban. So, and now the Taliban does not like them. So it helps to keep the region on the boil. And the BLA essentially is not facing a lot of resistance from external forces, as the takeaway that we can come up with at this time. And as we've seen, the international dynamics are quite complicated, and we shouldn't be quite as reductive as this is my friend, this is my enemy. When it comes to international relations, there are always certain interests that are helped by certain people, even within a country, as we've seen with Balochistan. So now, I'd like to sort of wind this down because I have spoken for longer than I thought I would. So this momentum in the BLA movement, and there have been statements, okay, that are saying that they are very close to independence and things like that. The region has a lot of land. Like I mentioned, they have a very large land border as well with Iran, and they have a lot of land and a lot of resources. It's not easy to break away and then be responsible for administrating all of those resources, because there are countries around. The same thing that happened in 1948 when Balochistan declared its independence and Pakistan swooped in and annexed them will happen again with, is very likely to happen again. Now I can't predict the future, but it's very likely to happen again with any other region as well, and could well be Pakistan as well, because they do have resources and they are funded from various nations as well as a client state. So if it's not the US, well, I think Turkey is struggling as well, but it has funds. So yeah, the reality is that these things are complex. Can we root for the people of Balochistan and think that they need a voice and they need to protest these enforced disappearance of any protester, of any activist that the Pakistani state deems a danger? And they're really not even dangerous. Some of the protests were actually peaceful and they were just large gatherings of people. But anyway, yes. So while rooting for the people, because we know, again, I'm bringing up the Yazidis because we know what happens when, forces like this come and try to disappear any sort of ethnic uh, realities and people like that. So, while we can do that, the truth is that Balochistan is not going to find itself on steady ground if it just declares independence. There are way too many foreign interests involved and established ones. So, some people think that Bangladesh in 1971 was independent, but it was helped a lot by India and then by the US. It established they were, and by the way, it is still under the least developed country status, which affords it a lot of lower tariffs. It's something that I've covered in articles as well. You might want to read that. I've linked that down below. So they, again, it functioned as a sort of client state and a buffer state for India, but also it has a lot of, it was kept independent by India and by a sort of acquiescent US government at that time. And Pakistan had its own problems. So, but the same thing is not necessarily true of every other country seeking independence, and we must be very cognizant of the issues that Balochistan as an independent entity might fall prey to. So that's all I have. I'm thinking of making the same video in Hindi. I hope that brings some interest. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for making it along this far.